Yeah, good question. The workshops are longer term. They're 6 weeks long, and it's a group situation. So rather than being just a one-on-one conversation with me, it's a whole group interaction. And so what they're bringing to the table is all very different, and it's a process that we all participate in. It's very non-hierarchical kind of thing, and the aim of it is always to foster people's individual artistic voices above anything else. And by the end of it, we all kind of end up with a bit of a group language about how we evaluate photos and how we support each other in prioritizing our most interesting photos and the ones that give the most insight into who we are individually as artists. And the one-on-ones incorporate some of that, but it's more about addressing specific issues that someone might want to grapple with, someone might have questions about the overall direction of their work or about specific problems they're facing with composition or trying to understand what their best work is. We can really cut to the chase in a lot of cases. Sometimes people have questions they want to present to me that they don't necessarily want to present to a bunch of other photographers as well, and that's fair. So I don't know, it's a different sort of process, but the point of view that I bring to the table is the same. The hard part with sort of answering random internet questions that we've sometimes tried to do is they end up being very general and not specific to someone's actual work. And that's why I was really excited to do this, because this is something I do all the time on usually online, but I have a lot of faith in this process because you're dealing with something actual, and not just sort of the hypothetical, how do I get better at blah, 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 let's deal with actual pictures. So I'm excited for that.
Hi, my name is Yuki Yamada. I shoot every day. First off, I wanted to, so up to this day, I have been trying to figure things to solve my issues by myself. I wanted to make this a good chance to have an outside opinion and try to applicate that to my photography and take it to another level. I like how, Alex Webb and Konstantin Minos, I like how their frames are very complex. There's a lot of things you can discover each time you look at the photo. Shin Noguchi is for a different reason. I like how his photos are very simple. It evokes feelings a lot. I can imagine what he was feeling when he was shooting those photos.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how about you?
All right, have a seat.
Thank you.
Hey man, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. So, I don't really know you at all. So can you just start off by telling me how long you've been doing photography in this way, and what's been going on? How's it been?
In general, I've been doing photography about 3.5 years. I started doing this, I wouldn't like to say this, but so-called street photography. Yeah. About a year now.
A year?
About a year, yes. And I'm facing this issue for the last half year, like 6 months. I'm not too satisfied with what I'm getting. I noticed that all my photos, they look the same. They're all tunnel visioned. Like kind of boring. There's no depth to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I started fiddling around with how I shoot. So after I noticed that, I try to stop intentionally avoiding tunnel vision, trying to put multiple subjects, doing something different than what I would usually do. Mm-hmm. But then it is different from what I've been getting. It's not like tunnel vision and things like that, but it lacks impact, it lacks context, and I'm not sure if I'm heading the right direction. But first off, I don't know what the right direction for me is at the moment as well.
Well, when you first got into this, what was your reason for doing it? What were you inspired by, or what did you think you were after?
First I got into this, there was no major specific reason. So I came to New York about the same time, 3.5 years ago. And originally I was only planning to stay around for 5 years. So I was like, why not get a camera, shoot with a proper tool, not a cell phone. Let's take it out for a spin on the streets. I started shooting first random fire hydrants and some weird stuff that I see on the streets. Not people though. Yeah, so it was just the purpose of documenting my stay here in the US. That was my initial motivation that I picked up the camera.
And then where did the the entry into what we call street photography happen? Like, was it something you saw? Was it somebody else's work? Was it, what happened?
Well, so for a long time after I started photography, I would shoot by myself. I didn't have photographer friends. So I think last July or June, I got my Leica M6. I was shooting around, I think I had like a half day off or something, and I was shooting around Bryan Park. And I saw Polly, Sean, and those guys. And along the way, I saw many more other street photographers. I saw how they reacted to things happening on the streets, how they were shooting. I was like, wow, this is cool. I should try shooting like that too. And that's how I got into it.
So it sounds like, in a way, part of what got you into doing this sort of practice was observing the practice itself more than the pictures and their possibilities, right? So at a certain point, like what work did you start looking at? Was it mostly just people that you had encountered that you knew, or did you get books and look at older things too? Like
Yes.
what happened?
Books, I'm a big fan of photo books. I can't quite remember when that started, but I started collecting a lot of books. I think one of the first ones was, I think I just looked it up on the internet, famous street photographers.
Right.
and I found Henry Cartier-Bresson. I was shooting black and white when I first started, so I started off from there, went to more modern people like Phil Penman, Devin Allen, and then went to Alan Schaller, and also started going like more older people too, like Brassai and a bunch of other people. And now these days I've been looking at a lot of Alex Webb, Konstantin Manos, Shin Noguchi, Harry Guyart.
Yeah, the big color people.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Jeff Jacobson?
I've heard the name, but I haven't studied his work too much.
He was a big teacher of mine and a remarkable color photographer, and shot the majority of his career on Kodachrome, and then when Kodachrome went away, he switched to digital. And it's different, but it's still just remarkably cool. And yeah, he was one of those people. It was like, I'd rather go digital than try to find another film, and just so he went and he never looked back. But Jeff was a really huge help to me, really inspirational, and really different from those other people you just mentioned. So yeah, one of the things that's different about you from like some of the people that I've talked to is that way of sort of coming into it from the practice, and then you have to get to that point where you start looking at your work and going, there's something I want from these pictures that I'm not getting. And so then you're sort of changing your orientation, right? Instead of it being about the way we're living and the stuff we're doing, now it's like looking at these results and maybe having a little less of a language for, or a language or a kind of sense of how to evaluate, you know, what's working and what's not working in a picture. Now, a term you just used a bunch of times was this tunnel vision. Now, what I think that means, I don't know, but it sounds like you're talking about things where there's one primary interest and it's more or less center in the frame. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure I'm clear. Yeah, it's interesting how, whether anyone tells us or not, we start to notice how that's a weakness, or not as strong as other things we might do. But a lot of times we don't necessarily know, well, why? So can you pull up, do you have one of your tunnel vision pictures?
Several, actually.
Okay, all right. Well, let's start with one that you would say, okay, this is what I'm talking about when I say tunnel vision.
I feel like this one, the guy was interesting, but I noticed that, like, for example, I think this person here is not too necessary, to be honest. I feel that way. And like, for example, the background like has no context.
Yeah, I mean, this may not be the best example to address the like tunnel vision issue, but to me, the problem with things that are center weighted is that there's no tension at all. Like when you have a frame, like, you know, this box that our picture is, when things are like right in the center, the reason that the conventional wisdom is that you shouldn't do that is really because there's absolutely no pressure, tension, or anything like that. It's just the most comfortable place that something could be, to where like everything around it just becomes like nothing. And when things are near the edges or the corners, they have all this tension, this sense of things being pulled from each other or stretched, or even just the sort of sense of something being up against this totally imaginary edge. Like we're making that edge. That edge doesn't exist in the world. So the conventional wisdom, the only thing wrong with conventional wisdom is that it's conventional, but there's still some wisdom in it. So this isn't so super tunnel vision because, first of all, always the face is where our eye goes first, right? Like the first, like maybe we see these arms as an important hook too, but basically our eyes tend to go right to the face. So the face is not centered. It's a little off and it's up high in the frame. So this where you've placed him feels actually really good. But what you've noticed is that this figure on the left, who is taking up, roughly a quarter of your frame and is equal in size to your primary interest, is just this big gray coat, right? You're not getting anything from them. So the problem isn't that they're there. The problem is that you needed a moment where they were turned a little bit, or gesturing, or doing something to justify their presence. Because otherwise, I mean, as far as filling space goes, which like pictures want to be balanced, right? If they're going to be imbalanced, then there needs to be a justification for it. But ideally, you want to have some balance. And if your primary interest here, this character, is close to the center, you want things on either side to sort of justify that you've even created that much space, right? So ideally, in a perfect world, we want all the things that are to the sides of him to be supporting whatever your interest was. Now that support can take on many, many, many manifestations, right? It could be that this person is doing something very contradictory to them, or something that's going on in the background seems like maybe it's actually related to what he's doing, or so unrelated that it makes him seem like an astonishing miracle, right? So it's not about like, this person isn't doing anything, they shouldn't be there. It's, no, this person has a function to play, but that function isn't really being lived out. They're looking at their phone, they're mostly turned away. It's just becomes this big gray bubble. But yeah, I think you're right that the left side is the problem, but it's not because you have this guy too centered. It's just a question of balance and support. So that's one way to look at it. Is there another that you think of as?
Maybe after listening to your explanation, it may not necessarily be considered tunnel vision, but
cool. Well, no, this is maybe a better illustration of what you were talking about. Okay. But yeah, this is a great example, because what I find with pictures like this, and I see a lot of them, is, so think of it like this. Every picture has to have a sufficient level of interest or astonishment or something like that, right? And it isn't that you can't do it with a single person, but you're putting a lot of burden on them. Like now all the burden is on this person and their wig and their glasses to make the level of the photo what it is, right? Because while this is some somewhat interesting architecture that we know very well, and the light is nice, those are just aesthetics.
I see.
It's not really like super form and content contribution, right? So all of the pressure is now on this person to carry this picture. It can happen. I have seen pictures where the person centered in the middle of the frame with nobody to support them is actually that shockingly interesting, but it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare. And so, like, that's the way I think of it. It's like, nothing is a rule. I don't believe in rules. I don't believe in dogmas. I don't believe in any of that. So there are people who would look at this and be like, don't put them in the center, blah, 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 you know, and they need this, you need that. And it's like, no, I think it's possible to make a picture like this and have it be amazing, but it's not common. What did it look like when it started to change, when you tried some different things?
Yes, so these are some of the photos. Let's see.
Oh, Yeah, all right, let me move these. Okay, so clearly the way that you're constructing these is different. Yeah, I can see that. So what do you think is still lacking in these? Like you're not satisfied with these, if that's clear.
Yeah.
So, but they're definitely different in the way you're constructing the image. So what's not there for you?
So I feel like, I mean, I get what I'm trying to do, but, but like when I look at the results, it looks like, how should I put it? It's like there's no context to it. There's like, it's unorganized, I would say maybe. Not unorganized, but.
No, these are organized. I mean, I mean, I would say that's the chief quality of them, is that there's a sense of organization. So it's something else. Now, when you say it's lacking context, what do you mean by that?
Like, for example, like this photo.
Yeah.
It's just like a bunch of people sitting in those, resting in public corners.
Yeah.
Looking down on their phones.
Right.
And like, that's it.
Right. So what does that have to do with context?
Maybe lacks impact is the correct word, maybe, I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I'll agree with that. Right. So one of the things that I think is important is to like check in on the language you're using to think about your photos, because sometimes that language will sort of box us into certain ways of thinking that miss the point, right? So if you're thinking that the problem with this is it lacks context, then you're kind of ignoring the very obvious problem with it, which is it has no energy or impact, right? Now, I remember a period of years when I was first shooting where the idea of energy and impact wasn't even in my head, right? And now it feels very different, because always I'm thinking, like, I begin from the certain assumptions. The assumptions are like, impact is good. You know, impactful is a good quality. Energy is a good thing. Raising questions in a photo that can't be answered, that's a good thing, right? So just beginning from those kind of premises lead me away from stuff like this. And I mean, not gonna lie, I still take the photos. I still take the boring, energyless photo because something attracts me or whatever, but you know, especially shooting digital, I have no reason to not do it. But then when I'm evaluating, you know, that picture is gonna come up in my, you know, whatever, in my Lightroom or however I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm just gonna go, next. Because I know that any way that I'm gonna look at this and find a justification for keeping it is gonna be bullshit. You know, I'm just going to be trying to convince myself that there's, oh, but I really like the light and this color is nice and whatever. Like, it's not helping, because there's still no impact. There's no, you know, strong thing. What else do you find is not there for you that you're wishing for?
I think earlier I mentioned where I'm like looking a lot into photos of Alex Webb and Konstantin Manos and those guys. I'm not sure if this is the correct mindset, but like, what happens with me all the time, not necessarily just photography, but everything in general, is when I have somebody that's inspiring me a lot, I try to aim for like the exact same direction. And I think why I'm feeling a little bit dissatisfied is because like those characteristics that I see in the works of the photographers that I mentioned, it's not really there. I want a more complex photograph in terms of like having multiple focus points inside the frame. I'm trying to do it, but it's not there, I feel.
Right. Well, look, first of all, there's clearly an improvement going on in terms of how you're constructing pictures. But I think, you know, there needs to be more interest in the content as well. Like the ways that you're improving how you construct an image, they're easy to see. Like the way you're having some things closer, intermediate, and farther, the way you're like clearly seeing diagonals in the picture, using frame within the frame, you know, all these sort of devices that are easy to put names on. This one especially interested me because of this sort of sense of this big check mark going through it formally, and then these pillars all seem to support that because they all point down into it. And so like you're getting this like improvement of your whole kind of sense of form, which is great. And if you've been looking at like Alex Webb's work and stuff, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing, the way he's constructing images it's not just sort of a right to left, left to right. There's like these senses of space. What someone like Alex Webb does though is he's also identifying those spaces, those scenes, and then waiting for something really magical to wake it up so that it's not just a nice formation. Like you'll notice, I'm sure you've seen, there's plenty of them, people who imitate his work, and some of them are very good at it, except that they all look like just the formal and color aspect, and they don't make you go, they don't give you that gasp because they don't have that little extra thing that he's so intent on including. So I feel like in this, period of what you've been working on, what the biggest thing lacking is a sense of energy. Here you have one character whose back is to us, right? So backs generally don't convey as much energy. Again, there's no rules. Like every now and then I have a picture where somebody's back is to me, but there's things about the image that justify it, and so we're good. So it looks like in your previous photos you were like finding content that was really exciting, but the forms were nothing. And now you're changing your concept, you're finding forms that are certainly more interesting, even if they have problems. Like this one has problems to me. There's a big hole here. In a perfect world, we have equal strength of content and form. We're not always going to get it. In fact, we're mostly not going to get it. But in a perfect world, it's like, this analogy I've been using lately is like, let's imagine the great photo is like a pot of water that we want to have boiling, right? And we have two burners underneath the pot. One is form, and one is content. And in a perfect world, they'd both be at the same intensity of fire, and the water boils. Now, if one of those is a little less hot, the other one has to get hotter to make up for it. So if we have, one of these photos that has some interesting form going on, or well, let's use this one. If this has some interesting form going on, now that form has to be the entire flame to get that water boiling. And if you had some hotter content in there with it, then we've got boiling water. So that's sort of the kind of bonehead analogy that I've been using lately, because I think that it addresses the idea of balance, that, if there's a certain problem or weakness, it's only a killer to the photo if there's nothing to justify it or get over it. There's some problems in photos that you can just totally distract people from with something else in the photo. So where like, if we were going to really pick it apart, we'd go, oh, we wish that wasn't there. But how much does it matter? Because it's a tiny thing in the frame, and there's these other big things that are really astonishing. There's so much stuff in the world that looks interesting or is interesting to me that I've learned is just not very photographic. And that's what we're dealing in the content that we're finding. When you're out on the street, in your life, wherever you are, there's no end of things to appreciate. But in the end, it's got to be something that when you stick a frame around it in a certain way is going to be great material for you to make something impactful. And you're clearly seeing things. You said yourself you think these are not very impactful. No, another thing that I like to start with as an assumption is that the photos that we make, ideally they should be memorable. Now, what makes memorable? It can be a lot of different things. But if you don't start from the idea that it should be, that someone should see your photo and then a week later be like, man, I remember that photo. Like, if you're not starting from that as your value system, it's very hard to have it appear. I know that we're not professionals here. We're not, getting hired to do this. We're doing this for our own passion. So of course you're allowed to indulge whatever the hell interest you have. But I still think we're trying to make art.
Yes.
And we're still trying to do something we would ourselves judge as good. And so even with your own indulgences and interests in mind, like there's a way to make the pictures impactful. I also feel like it would be really lousy of me to not point out to you how short a time you've been doing this, and to give yourself a little break. That like a year of doing this and having results that look like this, you're doing fine. You know, like it takes a while. Like when I think about, you know, where you're at and the kind of stuff you're facing, it's like, you know, I remember when that was my world, when I was like, how do I get these things to be great? And then it starts getting better, it gets better, and you start to feel like, oh, I've got some photos, and then other questions come up, right? That you're probably not even in at all. Like you start wondering, well, what's all this for? And what does this make? And, you know, like I've been going through that. So for the last year, I've been working on this, which this is a dummy of the book that I'm going to be putting out later this year with Red Hook Editions, called Heavenly Arms, which, like I said, it's been like a year-long process of digging through 10 years of photos, right? So you're a year in. So this doesn't even start from when I started to have some decent photos. It's like years after that. So the oldest photo in here is from 2014. First of all, there was this really difficult process of figuring out what it is, because I'm not operating from these really obvious sort of themes that a lot of people might, of like, you know, it's a book of dogs on the street, or street as the topic, or New York as the topic. It's like all those things might be in there, but there's something else that I've identified as my central interest in all these pictures that is here, and it's not necessarily easy to talk about. It opens with this full spread of this one picture, not telling you yet anything, just like this just leads you in, and then I have this quote by Max Beckman, and then you're in it. Then you're in this sequence of these photos, which, as I said, these are all from, you know, over a long period of time. You know, they were not taken with the idea of each other. In the end, I really feel like it becomes a thing and takes you on a certain progression of ideas and feelings. And there are recurring motifs, but they weren't, you know, they were something I had to kind of discover in the whole editing process. And then in the process of design with Alex Patterson Jones, who's been working with me at Red Hook, you know, deciding which pictures were going to be in this sort of orientation, and then which ones would be 3/4 like this, and so on, like, and in what order. Like all of that became really powerful to experience how it changed the overall feeling. The final edit ended up being only 63 pictures. That's out of 10 years. How do you plan that? How do you envision that? How do you go out and take these pictures wanting that? Like, you can't have that stuff in your head. So that's why this whole last year was so difficult, because I had to just go through that process. So now I have to fund it, because it costs a lot to print real books. And so I'll be doing a Kickstarter, yeah, it should be out in October. I'm pretty excited. I could tell from the way you talked about this that you're not interested in, you know, adhering to some idea of the genre. That, you know, you called it so-called street photography, which made me very happy, because I don't think there's anything to be gained by fitting in. You know, one of the tricky things about, you know, looking at other people's work and trying to imitate things you see in it is that you can start to become very deterministic in the way you're shooting, which I don't think is, for a lot of us, it's not the best way to find your own way. I don't know what your process was in making these things, but, you know, some people, if they feel like, some of the people that you mentioned as like people whose books you looked at and so on, they're very deterministic. They're people who, they kind of see a scene, they set it up, they kind of see their frame, and then they wait for something to walk in, all that kind of thing. Very few people can make exciting work that way. It ends up being easy stuff to repeat, which is nice, I guess, if you want to be consistent. It creates a look that becomes recognizable, but it doesn't feel very personal, and doesn't feel very, to me, very memorable in a real way, because it kind of lacks soul. And I don't get from you that you're interested in giving up soul. So, you know, for me, the look of discovery is a lot more compelling than the look of execution. So, you know, if you're making scenes like this by kind of sizing it up and, you know, saying, oh, maybe a little this way, maybe a little that way and all that, and waiting for something to be in just the right place, you might do better to just kind of run and gun and like respond to things very quickly and before you have time to think about it too much. You know, I think a lot of us get into a sort of, like when we're craving improvement, we're craving, you know, things to be more impactful and deeper, and we start trying to control it more. And I don't know that controlling it more is necessary. Having the right ideas and values in your head is of thinking about, okay, maybe I don't want to have them right in the center of the frame if I can help it. Maybe I want to think about the shape of things as the camera sees it. Thinking about diagonals, you know, thinking about all these little things in pictures that make them construct the way you're now moving into, but to retain the spontaneity, the energy, and to not be so tight. I think you'll find more energy that way, for instance. You know, even if you don't have, like, you're not always going to have somebody walk into a scene like this who's doing high kicks or something where you could be like, wow, that really helped. You know, you don't always get that, but you can make your approach to it looser and risk some mess. Mess is underrated. I have not found the kind of stuff that I was craving by becoming more rigorous, you know, and more controlling of outcome. I've actually found it more by being surprised at things, by kind of just going for it. What other kind of stuff has come up for you?
That was actually one of the issues that I've been having these days. So I think during the phase where when I showed you the first batch of photos, I was more running gun that time. And then I started doing this kind of stuff, which continues to this day. I get very reluctant to press the shutter. I see something, I try to frame it, and I move around, change angles, do whatever, and then I notice, well, maybe it's not worth shooting, and then I just walk away. Wow, I've been shooting, let's say, 5 rolls per week when I started like, doing that kind of stuff, but like now it takes me to finish 5 rolls like almost 2 weeks, so twice the time. So yeah, so that was one of the issues that I've been really struggling with these days.
I mean, you got to shoot a lot of pictures. I mean, there's just no way around it. I know a ton of photographers who are like more talented and accomplished than me, who all continue to shoot tons and tons and tons of bad photos. As like, we've never found a way around it. You know, like to get the good ones, you have to shoot a lot of bad ones. So when you're approaching one of those situations where you feel like interested but then hesitant, just go ahead and take the photo and then check it out and see, is there a way to make this better, or, you know, like take a few more stabs at it, whatever. But start from the immediate, like, go for it. To kind of finish up on some level, I want to just say one more thing about impact, because that word came up a bunch. Again, like so many of the things we've talked about, impact can come about so many different ways. It can be a very quiet impact. It could be a very explosive impact. It could be so many things. I don't usually like to get into specifics about that because it's kind of unfair. It's like, I went to a crit once where someone was like, oh, this photo would be really great if that garbage can were on fire, right? And you're like, that wasn't there. Like, there's no way to make, that's not useful advice. So what I would just say is be looking for the things that become impactful in photos for you. Sometimes there's something that violates something, like you have this nice piece of order and then something comes in that wrecks that, right? So we can see the evidence of the organization, but then there's a problem, right? Sometimes it's seeing that there is a great atmosphere about a place, but recognizing what's wrong with this. It's this guy with his back turned, right? But you like that he's there, so wait for him to turn around, right? Like making those little adjustments that seek the little bit more impactful outcome in any given situation.
So another questions that I had, it's related when you mentioned, when you asked me some questions about this photo.
Yeah.
So I'm having, I'm not sure how to detach my feelings from the photo and review the photos like objectively. I think I'm starting to be able to do that a little bit better, but yeah, I've been having that problem for like I think that was like one of the longest issues that I've been having. Like for example, like when I mentioned that I like the light and whatnot, that feelings was strong against the photo, and it kind of blinded me to the fact that the photo itself was not that strong. That is one of the recent issues or more of the stronger issues that I've been having these days.
The bad news is that continues. Okay. the good news is it gets better, and it gets easier to accept, right? Like I know that there are certain photos of mine that I have a real attachment to that other people are just like, I don't know. And I can't quite see it sometimes, even now. There's certain ones where I'm like, come on, it's got so much vibe, like what is it? But it's a personal thing. I think the easiest one for me to have kind of gotten over is there's some photos that I used to really be attached to because I remember how difficult it was to get.
Yes.
Those, I've gotten really good at letting go of that now. But it just takes a lot of experience and practice to like be like, damn, you know, when you come right down to it, it's just not that great a photo. There's a lot of people who they see stuff in the world they like, and then they use the camera to just like draw a rectangle around it, and then, you know, what's that? It's just a thing you liked, you know, big deal. Like anyone's doing that, but like we're working in a medium that has all these powers, like, and you're starting to really discover them. But then the thing about impactful content is it's like if somebody tells you a joke and it's really funny, you have an involuntary physical reaction. Your body just laughs. Yes. And then you think about why. You go, oh, that's so funny because that part was so true and that part was a real surprise, you know, and then you can kind of analyze it. But when you look at a picture that really hits, like first you have a reaction, your body or your mind and body like go through something, and then you start going, oh wow, and there's also that pigeon back there, and there's this and that. You start seeing little things that add into it. But looking at pictures, it's an experience of simultaneity. We're seeing all these things at once. Our eyes are actually seeing the whole frame, but we can't comprehend the whole thing at once, right? So first there's what I call the quick read, where you're just like, this one has a great quick read. Immediately I'd be like, whoa, there's this like effect, right? And then I start looking at it a little longer and I go, yeah, well, you know, she's not really doing anything and this and that, and I start picking it apart. But the quick read's good. In a perfect world, we have a strong quick read and there's more to discover as we pick it apart some more, right? So these are all lofty ambitions, right? So, you know, your attachments that you're talking about, those are difficult to get over. With some photos it's going to be easier than others, you know, but the greatest medicine for that is time passage. You know, as you collect these photos and you put them away and you think about them, whatever, you're going to revisit these photos a year from now and you're going to be like, well, no, of course I don't care for this one. No, this one has, you know, you're just going to immediately see for you which ones are just not really happening, and it's not going to matter to you anymore that like, oh, that was so hard to do that. Like you might have a real attachment to this character, right? And you might think, oh, that was such a great moment of finding that person. They just seem to walk out of nowhere. You know, those are great memories and they're great feelings, but in the end the picture is all that matters. So with some distance, you'll get that more. But then you'll be making new pictures to have attachments about, right? So it doesn't end, but it gets easier.
I see.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the best advice, because like there's no magic wand on that one. Certain things you're just going to feel an attachment to. So just slow everything down, you know, and give things time.
Yeah, I think that's what I've been trying to do these days. Before when I went to film, I was shooting digital, I would just load this SD card every day when I come back home. If it was filmed like before I was shooting 5 rolls a week, so I would usually get the results back like the next week. But now because I'm shooting slower, I think I see my results a lot later. So I think that's what's helping me with that aspect a little bit. So yeah, so now it's very, I guess I should just go on that route of
I mean, like everything that goes on in a practice like this, like each aspect of it that we deal with becomes deeper and deeper. So like for me, I might be a lot quicker to go through my photos, and especially shooting digital, and sort of making initial judgments of like what's even worth me looking at a second time, you know, and I kind of mark all those. But I'm also looking at them and seeing all these things to learn about myself. And I appreciate that part so much that it's not as important to me to be like, but I loved doing this photo, it needs to be the photo. Like, it's okay. Most of them don't quite make it. And Winogrand said the same thing. He's like, 99% of what I do, just, it doesn't quite make it. And, you know, tomorrow's another day. So yeah, I mean, the basic look of the photos looks just great. Like whatever you're doing with your film and, you know, all of that is everything seems completely fine. So don't worry about the technical, just form and content, discovery, risk, you know, not taking the easy photo, but wait for, you know, or seek the photo that has more something on the edge, you know, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Sound good?
Yes, thank you so
All right.
much.
I don't get to do this on Zooms.
Oh yeah, you're
I get
right.
to shake hands, but yeah.
Yo, what's up, Yuki?
Hey, what's up, Holly?
So it's been a month since your one-on-one session with Reuben. What do you think, after a month has passed, your key takeaways have been since that session?
Well, so I think there's a lot of takeaways that I got. Ones that affected me the most was it was when I addressed to Reuben that I had trouble clicking the shutter all the time. He was telling me to, you know, actually focus on reacting or responding to subjects. I think that has affected me a lot. And since then, I think I'm starting to enjoy photography again, because prior to the session, I was not kind of enjoying it too much. But so I think that was the biggest influence that the session had on me. And of course, the session, like I said, it had impacted me in a good way a lot. But of course, it's not going to make me a great photographer instantaneously. But I think along the way, as I continue as my path as a photographer, I think I'm going to face moments again where I stumble, I don't know what to do. But I think that session reminded me of that. It's going to help in a long way, trying to, you know, remember what Reuben has told me in that session and help me keep on going to do what I love and, you know, and progress as a photographer.
Have you noticed yourself photographing differently since then?
Yes. I shoot a lot more. Yes. Yeah, and I enjoyed it a lot too.
That was probably one of your, if not your first kind of mentoring one-on-one sessions.
Yes.
Is that something you'd recommend for other people to seek out? If not with Reuben, with somebody else?
Yes, I would definitely. I mean, I think it's not for everyone maybe, but for me personally, it was a very big thing. I think for a lot of people too, it would benefit. Because like, I think I addressed this in the session too, like throughout the years that I've been photographing, I necessarily didn't have anyone to ask how my work was and things like that. And it was the first time that Reuben actually pointed out the issues that he was seeing in my photos and actually answered my questions. So I think for me, that has helped a lot. And I would recommend it to other people too.
Cool. All right, thanks, Yuki.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now when they see us in the streets, all they wanna do is take pictures.